About 2 weeks after I moved into my new house here in Mexico, the lights went out. The power was gone.
At first, I wasn't worried because the power goes out here sometimes, especially in rural areas, and usually it flickers back on in a minute. So I assumed it was just one of those little flickers. And then evening came, and I looked across the road, and my neighbors had lights. In fact, all my neighbors had lights. And that was the moment a sneaking suspicion crept into the room with me. Should I have paid the electric bill by now? So I pulled out my phone and went to the electric company's website, and there it was, an overdue bill. They had cut my power for non-payment. Me, the woman who used to set up automatic payments for bills that weren't even due yet.
In my own defense, and it's a weak defense, I had never gotten an electric bill before in Mexico. In all the rentals I'd stayed with, the owner just paid it. And so I guess in the back of my deeply American brain, I was thinking I'd get a notice either by regular mail or by email, and that's just silly. I have never received a single piece of mail here, not a postcard, not a single coupon. The mail just doesn't get delivered here on my street, and it probably never will. A friend who lived here longer than me explained what to do. You go to the office, pay the overdue bill, and hope someone comes to turn it back on before too long. So that's what I did, fully expecting the lights to be on by morning. That night, I read by candlelight and went to bed early. There was almost something romantic about it. The next morning, the power was still out, and the romance ended abruptly. Because that's when I remembered that my water pump runs on electricity. No power, no pump. No pump, no running water. And this sounds like a small thing until it's been 3 days since you took a shower and there's no functioning toilet. On the second day without power, I was standing in my greenhouse staring at my rain barrel, which is a bright green ecosystem of algae, but I dipped a bucket in and carried it to the bathroom to flush the toilet. Thank God for the rain barrel. I had spent years of my life scrubbing in for surgery, 3 minutes at the sink every day, every finger, every nail bed, ensuring sterile fields with sterile gloves, and here I was, dipping a bucket into a barrel of algae water to flush my toilet. What had felt briefly romantic became something else altogether. As normal people went on with their normal lives, I spent 3 days maniacally focused on listening for the hum of the refrigerator. I begged a friend to let me charge my devices and use her Wi-Fi. The craving for a hot shower or any shower became an obsession, and I developed a completely new appreciation for watching TV. Eventually, 3 days later, the electricity came back on, and when I heard that little water pump buzzing along, I jumped for joy and hit the showers right away. Now I keep several bottles of tap water around the house at all times in case something like that happens again, and then at least I can flush the toilet without the algae. Lesson learned, pay your electric bill and they may not remind you to do it. Years before I moved to Mexico, I fell in love with the Pacific coast. Palm trees, beaches, I love the way the mountains meet the sea. It's like paradise. But it turns out what's paradise in January might not be the same in May. The trips I had taken there were always short and always in winter. And I just remember the feel of walking barefoot and the smell of salt in the air. I just love that coast. It's my favorite part of the world. And when I was there years ago, I just felt like everything back home couldn't reach me. It was perfect. What I didn't know was what that same coast feels like in April and May, when the air barely cools down at night. When you wake at 3 in the morning and the heat is still there pressing on you and your dogs are panting on the floor. That's when you realize this isn't a heat wave, this is the climate. The place I'd fallen in love with was real. It just wasn't the whole place. I'd only met one version of it. And I think this is what a lot of us get wrong when we dream about moving somewhere new. We fall in love with a place during its best season, then imagine living in that version forever. But a place has to work well on an ordinary Tuesday, not just a Saturday in February. A Tuesday in May, when nothing special is happening, you have errands to run, the washing machine just broke, and it's still 95 degrees at 10 o'clock at night. That's the test, and the one I had not given it.
And that's how I figured out what I needed. Because I didn't know in advance that April and May were the hottest months. The dogs and I left Oregon in late March, and we spent the next several weeks on the Pacific coast, one town and then another. And it was a particularly hot year. The rental I'd booked for most of that time didn't have air conditioning, and the heat was life-changing. We hid from the sun all day. I froze wet towels and laid them across the dogs during the hottest hours. Eventually, I broke the rental early, and we evacuated to a place with AC that I didn't really like, but just because I needed to be able to breathe. Then I started moving and exploring. Inland through Colima into the mountains of Jalisco. Lake Chapala was still hot and dry. Up through Guanajuato and San Miguel de Allende, and finally further south into the mountains of the states of Mexico and Michoacán.
And that's when my body stopped fighting the air and the heat, and the temperatures were cooler, and the nights were soft and with fireflies. And when I finally got to experience a summer in the mountains, it was green and vibrant, cool and rainy nights. I loved it, and I still do. The lesson wasn't that the Pacific coast was bad. It was beautiful, and it still is beautiful. It just wasn't for me to live in, not full time. My body needed elevation, rain, and cool nights, and I didn't know that about myself until I tested it in real conditions. On a real Tuesday, you might say. Looking back, I realized a lot of these mistakes came from asking the wrong questions before I even moved. Another mistake I made has to do with my new riding lawnmower. Ta-da! Recently, I finally worked up the courage to buy a riding mower. If you've watched my channel for a while, you may know that spending that kind of money doesn't come naturally for me. I can talk myself out of a purchase 6 different ways before breakfast. But with an acre and a half of grass, it was time. Time to put my money where my mouth was. A neighbor's gardener, Oscar, offered to help me navigate the purchase. He took me to a local shop owned by a friend of his. After shopping around a bit in Morelia, I decided I'd rather have a relationship with a local shop than save a little money somewhere else. So I put down a substantial deposit and they ordered the mower. About 2 hours after that, Oscar texted me a picture, but it was not the mower I had ordered. It was a lesser brand. I politely replied that I had agreed to buy a Troy-Bilt, not the other model in the picture. And after a while, back and forth, Oscar agreed. But by then, something had happened that kind of surprised me a little bit. I got suspicious. And there's a stereotype in Mexico that foreign residents think everyone is trying to rip them off. I'd always kind of rolled my eyes at that, and then suddenly there I was, wondering if I'd just become exactly that person. When the shop wanted me to pay the balance before they delivered the mower, I declined politely. I wanted to see it first to make sure it was new and the correct model and hear it run before I handed over the rest of the money. My understanding was that once I paid for it, whatever showed up at my house was probably mine forever. There wasn't going to be a nice return policy or someone asking if I'd like to exchange it or my money back. So we all met at the shop, and the mower was exactly what I'd ordered. Hector, the shop owner, looked a little puzzled when I asked him to put gasoline in it and start it up right there in his little shop, but he did it, and everything looked perfect. I felt relieved. A brand new mower. And then Hector handed me the receipt. The model number and serial number did not match the mower sitting in front of me, and I just looked at him and thought, "You've got to be kidding me." He smiled and rewrote the receipt with the correct numbers and then delivered the mower to my house. Showed me how to use it, and everything has been fine ever since. So I had become the suspicious foreigner, and they had become the shop that accidentally gave me a few good reasons to be suspicious. We had both lived up to the stereotypes. But what I took away from that experience wasn't cynicism, it was confidence. I could ask questions and it didn't offend anyone. In fact, once everything was sorted out, we all were happy about it. Okay, I got a little paranoid, but they weren't trying to cheat me. It was more about expectations and a clash of different cultures doing business in different ways. Back in the States, we have that expression, you had one job, like, couldn't you get it right? And we tend to complain and condemn mistakes and assume the worst. But here I found that people often react differently. Mistakes happen and you fix them and move on. It's much less dramatic than I was used to. Those are some of the funny ones, the mistakes and misunderstandings I've made since I moved to Mexico. But there is another mistake I think a lot of people make when they're contemplating a big life change. And it's harder to see because it doesn't look like a mistake at the time, it looks like progress. The mistake is thinking that the move is the finish line. For me, getting here was the hardest part. The years of wondering if I could, the packing, the selling things, giving things away, saying goodbye, and then the drive south with 2 big dogs and most everything I owned in the car. By the time I crossed the border, I was so relieved to be done with nursing and that whole life that even the hardest parts of getting here didn't feel that hard. The yellow strap holding my trunk closed, the long days of driving alone, none of it scared me the way it could have. I was too relieved to be done with all that. What I didn't expect was that the real change would start after I arrived and that it would be, of all things, such a joy. For the first time in decades, I had time and I had quiet. I had room to ask questions I've been too tired and too busy to ask for most of my adult life. Who am I when I'm not a nurse? Who am I when I'm not needed every day? And really, who am I when nobody is looking? And I got to find out, slowly and on my own schedule, with the dogs at my feet in this beautiful country. And I had time to finally think and write and just be, finally. I didn't know that part was coming. I'd been so focused on getting out that I hadn't really considered what would happen on the other side. And I got lucky. The other side for me turned out to be the best part. But it could have gone very differently. If I'd moved somewhere that didn't suit me, if I'd landed in a place that drained me instead of giving me room and energy, the inner work of becoming someone new might never have happened. I might have just traded one kind of exhaustion for another. And that's what I want to say to anyone who's thinking about a big change. The move itself isn't the answer. The place you choose has to be one that gives you room to become whoever you're becoming. Otherwise, you just move your old life to a new address. And that's actually why I created the Relocation Clarity Framework. It's a structured way to think through one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make. And it's not just where to live, but what kind of life you're actually trying to build for yourself. If you're in that stage of your own journey, I'll leave a link below the video. It's a way to ask deeper questions before you go, what you're actually trying to change, and whether a place can give you the room to do it, so that if you do make the leap, you land somewhere that lets the rest of the story unfold and the real you to come out. I'll link it below if you want to take a look. The move is not the finish line, it's the start of something, and the better your landing place fits you, the more that something gets to be. I want to end with something that I think about often. I made all the mistakes I just told you about and much more. I prepared badly in ways I didn't even know to prepare for, and I should have struggled here a lot more than I actually did. But early on in a little tienda in Malake, there was a little old woman behind the counter shelling peas, and she wasn't your typical abuelita. She had braided hair, silver at the roots and black at the ends, and a face you did not argue with. She looked very fierce. And she looked up when I told her I'd come across the border with just me and my dogs, and she called me hija. She gave me a tamarindo candy and told me to be careful with the men. Siempre pregunta, siempre mira, pero no pares. Always ask, always look, but don't stop, she said. I didn't think about it at the time, but she was the first person who kind of made me feel cared for here. It was just a small kindness freely given from a stranger, but it meant something to me. I got lucky in Mexico. It was generous to me in so many ways. And that, it turns out, is what I've been looking for. I just hadn't known what to call it. Looking back, I don't regret any of these mistakes. They were the price of becoming someone who actually lives here instead of someone who's just visiting. That's the thing about starting over. You don't just move to a new country. Eventually, if you stay long enough, that country moves into you. If you want to hear more about that, this video is about why I chose Michoacán, and I think you'll like it. If you're thinking about your own version of this, the workbook is there when you want it. Link in the description. Thanks for spending a little time with me today. And remember, a new life starts with seeing new possibilities for yourself. I'll see you next time.